after that, that's all I saw was a star in as Oz. Merry meet, my fellow bookish witches. Welcome to Witchy Reads. Today, I want to talk about the 2023 adult fantasy witch romance, A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon by Sarah Hawley. Before we summon our demon boyfriend, please make sure to like this video, and if the spirit moves you, subscribe to my channel. I have a physical copy of the book here. I do have a few annotations. I feel like I am getting better at annotating books as I read. I'm still figuring out my process. This book has been on my bookshelf / TBR list since about June. The book was published in March, so it's been on my shelf roughly 5 to 6 months. In the grand scheme of things, that is a relatively short time to be sitting on my shelf before getting picked up to be read. When I first heard about this book, I was really excited to read it, and the only reason I put it off for as long as I did is because I wanted to read it around the months of October and November to get the cozy autumn witchy vibes. The main thing that intrigued me about the story was the subtle enemies to lovers trope. That is honestly one of my favorite romance tropes, specifically rivals to lovers, just because enemies to lovers can sometimes have a little bit of toxicity in the relationship. I find healthy rivals to lovers a lot more fascinating. That is what pulled me in initially. Not to mention the fact that the main protagonist is a female and is a witch. She is a witch that is struggling with her magic. I always find really intriguing when there are magical creatures that are trying to come into their magic and learn how to control it.
I command you to stop! Stop!
Of course, I also really liked the autumn aesthetic, the cozy romance vibes. I meant for this to be a nice transition from my October spooky reads into my cozy November reads. I adore the book cover. I think it is the perfect combination of whimsical and nature magic. I also really like the cute character renditions of the two main characters on the cover. Although for me, with how they were described, I don't think they match really well, but that's just me. This was definitely a cute romance read. What really pulled me into the story was the witch Mariel's character arc, how she grows and is able to become strong and stand up for herself regardless of a man being in her life. I really think that romance stories that have that element where the woman can stand on her own and maybe not lean so heavily into that trope of fixing a man is really good, especially since the character of Oz, who is the demon, could have fallen into that, oh, I can fix him trope. I'm really glad that's not what the story did. Instead, we got these two really well written characters that fall head over heels for each other and are strong on their own. Each have their own really good character arcs and grow as characters. It made me more invested in their relationship simply because they were strong on their own. I think that's honestly the most healthy relationship you could ask for. Usually I like slow burn romances, and if that is what you're looking for, this is not it. It is a very quick jump in the sheets type of romance.
And you are?
Giselle.
Oh, Giselle! We shall be married in the morning.
That didn't bother me so much, even though the characters start having feelings for each other pretty dang quick. Them being physical takes a while, and in fact, she does a really good job of teasing that. Even though I wouldn't classify this as a slow burn, the way it is written makes you excited to get to that point of the romance. I think the outer conflict of the romance was interesting, although the weakest point of the book was the third act exact internal conflict of the relationship that usually happens in romance and rom-coms. I really think it fell flat. It definitely was a quick downhill for me in terms of quality. That doesn't mean that I disliked the book. It was definitely something that lessened the story for me ever so slightly. I liked the setting of the novel that takes place in this tiny town that is this epicenter for magic and magical creatures to come and congregate and live.
With your left hand, now we're gonna stroke and stroke. Keep those hips moving and stroke. Keep on going now.
I like the dynamics of the different creatures, that there are different magical creatures. That's not really made clear in the synopsis that that is the world you are entering in. And I was pleasantly surprised. I really like the fact that we have witches, warlocks, pixies, and demons. I also like how these magical creatures interact together and the ecosystem that exists, particularly how demons interact with the other magical creatures. The fact that demons don't really have a certain type of magic outside of being able to bargain for souls, whereas these other magical creatures usually are human or mortal, but they have these really powerful magical abilities, and demons are immortal, and that's really all they've got going for them. We primarily stay in Glimmer Falls in the world where Mariel, the main character, lives, because the demon has been transported to that area. We do get glimpses and some talks about the demon plane where Oz, the demon, lives, but we don't go too in depth where it feels like we're stretching too thin or the world building becomes a little too much. We are aware of the demon plane. We have a sort of idea of how it works in terms of what the souls are used for, what Oz's role is there as a bargainer, and why he is obsessed with fulfilling his role, needing Mariel's soul. So that I really appreciated. I do think the author has done her due diligence as far as research into the lore for demons and witches and how that would all interact. As someone who is a fan of supernatural elements, of fae lore, of witch lore, and of demon lore, I think this is a very well-crafted story. She makes it easy to follow along. Everything she has in the story as far as how those interactions work, to me, I think she did correctly. It's the spark inside, the place where magic comes from, the pulsing, beating, feeling part that made humans powerful yet fragile and impossible to predict. All humans possess that chaotic, passionate core, but only witches and warlocks produce magic from it, or had the ability to trade it away. I'm just gonna give a quick content warning for those who want to read this book. There is a very narcissistic mother-daughter relationship in it. If that is something that triggers you, just be aware. It's not super prevalent in the story, but it is there. And I will say, as someone who has dealt with that kind of situation, I can see how it would be a little triggering depending on your level of handling that. Also, be prepared for lots of in-depth discussions about demon death. As I said, this story takes place in the magical epicenter of the town of Glimmer Falls. Mariel, who is our main character, her two best friends, Claudia, who is a witch, and Themi, who is a pixie, her toxic mother, and a whole host of other magical creatures live in this town. Mariel comes from a very powerful family, and in that there is a lot of pressure on her to fulfill her role as a powerful witch. Not only that, but her mother received this crazy prophecy on the day that Mariel was born, saying that she was not only going to be a powerful witch, but the most powerful witch. There is a ton of pressure on Mariel to fulfill that role. We meet her in this place in her life where she has definitely not fulfilled that place in her family or in the magical community.
I'm not the one.
Sorry, kid.
It's made her a town pariah of sorts. It's really sad to see. You can feel the tension in her wanting to fulfill that role, specifically for her family. It also doesn't help that her mother makes her acutely aware just how much of a failure Mariel is. Spoiler alert, despite what her mother and family think of her, Mariel is absolutely a badass witch, and definitely the badass witch. She is an incredibly powerful nature witch. Her magic primarily focuses in communicating and working with nature, plants, things like that, whereas everyone else in her family is known for their spell casting and summoning, which I guess in the magical community is viewed as kind of like the jock level magic, and what Mariel is doing is definitely nerd theater kid magic, which is so incredibly sad. We are shown very early on just how powerful Mariel's nature magic is. She is a fellow nature witch, and I absolutely love her for it. Totally relatable. We meet Mariel. She is in her cute little cottage with her two besties. The first thing we see her do is explode a chicken. She was trying to do some spell casting. I believe she was trying to summon something, ended up accidentally summoning a chicken, and then when she tries to send it on its merry way, she ends up exploding it in like a torrent of guts and feathers. Very depressed about it. I mean, personally, I would be too. I wouldn't want to explode a chicken. Her friends try to reassure her. Ultimately, she wants to be left alone after that fiasco. Her friends take their leave, and she decides to bake some muffins. 10-10 coping mechanism. But of course, she can't just bake muffins because her mother and the prophecy are ringing in her head. She decides to try summoning a very particular flower to use in her baking, and then experiences Murphy's Law to the highest when she accidentally summons a demon into her kitchen.
No. No, no! Come on.
And this demon is hell-bent on trading something, anything, for Mariel's soul. The demon's name is Ozroth the Ruthless, Oz for short. He is our love interest. There are 3 things you need to know about Oz. 1, he has a reputation for being, well, ruthless. He hasn't been the nicest guy throughout his life. 2, that ruthless reputation has been obliterated by the fact that he has inherited a permanent human soul. A warlock that he was meant to do a soul trade with tricked him, and now he is walking around with a human soul inside him, PMSing his emotions all over the place. He doesn't know how to handle his newfound human emotions, and quite honestly, it is hilarious. And number 3, he is the proud owner of the aforementioned demon den. So now Ozroth the Ruthless, or Oz, is in Mariel's kitchen, and he hasn't been there for 30 minutes before Mariel's nosy mother appears out of nowhere and demands to know who this man is. Wanting to hide her colossal mistake, Mariel quickly comes up with the solution. Oh, this is Oz, my boyfriend. So we are off to the races. This is not a slow burn romance. This happens very early on. I remember when that happened, I chuckled to myself because I was like, okay, that is the pace that we are working with, and I am fine with it. One of the dilemmas they face with this lie is that Oz has demon horns. Because Mariel doesn't want anyone to know that he is a demon, they decide to cover his horns with various hats. They get progressively ridiculous. At some point, he ends up wearing a Stetson, and all I could imagine was Astarion from Baldur's Gate 3.
Sometimes we need to think with our heads before our knives, dear.
This plan with the hats is a bit laughable. It is made abundantly clear that Oz is a very well-known demon bargainer that has dealt with a lot of mortals and should be very well known as far as how he looks. Mariel just decides the best course of action is to Clark Kentify him. In addition to the fake dating shenanigans, Mariel is also entangled in a lot of local political drama. I like that this is added to the story because it gives a little bit more issues to keep the story going along. This also adds to the bit where I say that Mariel becomes stronger and becomes her own person. It is through this storyline of dealing with the issues in her town, and the fact that the magic is threatened makes her reveal her very powerful nature, and I just absolutely love that. A lot of the town's land has been sold to build a resort that would effectively disrupt out the ecosystem and destroy the magical flow that is coming into this town. It is a magical epicenter. There is a group of people that are protesting, and Mariel and her friends are a part of that. It's really the elder witches and magical creatures that are all for this. I almost feel like if you are a magical creature and your life and livelihood hinge on magic being a thing, the fact that you would simply put in a resort that would just give you money and take away your magic is insane to me. Being an all-around good person and a nature witch, Mariel takes a hard offense to this, and her friends join in to protest what is happening to their town. Because Oz can't really leave her alone until a bargain is struck, he is dragged all over town. Not only is Mariel dealing with her town shenanigans, but she also is taking time to try and learn as much as she can about demon bargaining to see if there is a loophole to get out of the deal with Oz. Oz has made it clear to her that no, there is no such loophole. She is going to have to trade her soul. The reason why he is so adamant about getting the soul is because the demon plane uses souls, specifically souls that are magical in nature, so witches, warlocks, to put them on the demon plane's electrical grid. For lack of a better way of explaining this, think of it as like Monsters, Inc. The screams and the laughter power Monsterland. The magical souls of the mortal world power the demon plane, and that is why demons that are bargainers such as Oz are really important to the demon ecosystem. There's definitely a conundrum because we have on one hand Oz wanting to fulfill his duty to the demon plane and provide more souls. He is also starting to get feelings for Mariel. With Mariel, we have the town shenanigans, her crazy family wanting her to fulfill her prophecy, getting out of this demon deal, her growing feelings for Oz, and being really distracted by his demon deck. I know you're probably curious, and yes, these two characters definitely take a role in the hay. I wouldn't classify this book as smut. There really are only two sex scenes, one taking up an entire chapter and the other being a quick blurb. After two failed attempts at trying to dance the goat's jig, we get an entire chapter, as the book describes it, Oz fucking her into her mattress. I'm paraphrasing, but only slightly. Now, Mariel is trying to protest the sale of the land in between morning, afternoon, and evening delights. While Mariel has been protesting and venturing further out into the forest where the land has been sold, she has started to notice the land is starting to rot. She's not really sure what is causing it, considering that we are in a land of magical creatures, that someone is tampering with the ecosystem and it is rotting the magic from within. Being the badass that Mariel is, she manages to fix the rot that is taking over the forest, but it is slowly wearing out her magic and her energy, so she can't keep this up. During all of this, Oz starts experiencing weird occurrences when he gets overly emotional. Magical blue lightning will come out of him. The warlock's soul that he now possesses is giving him magical abilities. In addition to dealing with his human emotions, he is now dealing with magical powers that he has to learn to control. Having uncontrollable magic is dangerous in any setting. Both Mariel and Oz are also still trying to find a way out of the demon deal. Eventually, they decide that they can't find a loophole, so the only way out is to simply let Mariel live her life, let that run its course, let them have a life together, and then when she dies, Oz can simply take her soul when she no longer is using it. It's kind of a depressing thing to think about, especially for Oz being immortal, because he doesn't want to think about Mariel dying. He is now in love with her. They really feel like this is the best solution to their problem. Oz is fairly certain that Mariel will eventually get sick of him because he literally cannot be further than like 2 blocks away from her at any given time because of this soul bargain. It may not seem like it, but honestly, that whole situation is way more romantic than I made it seem. The only one not okay with this arrangement is Oz's abusive buzzkill of a mentor, Astaroth of the Nine. See, he has a bet going with the other demon cabinet members. That's not their official title. I honestly don't remember what they were called in the book, and I hate them, so I don't really feel the need to look that up for them and give them that respect. So sorry, not sorry. Astaroth has bet that Oz will fulfill his duty and redeem his reputation by getting Mariel's soul. Astaroth has given Oz until the end of the month to do so. This gives Oz 2 weeks to get Mariel's soul. Since Oz and Mariel have agreed to let her live her life and wait for her to die before taking her soul, they both have just decided to say, F it. Mariel helps Oz stand up to his mentor, and Oz helps Mariel stand up to her crazy mother and her family and their crazy expectations for her. Then one of Mariel's relatives discovers that Oz is actually a demon and blames him for the rot that has been coming into the forest, because this is when it's revealed that the rot taking over the forest is demon magic. Now, in the book, they make it clear that demons don't really have magic aside from being a soul bargainer. Part of that is that they are allowed to do certain things in the vein of getting a soul. So, because Mariel loves the forest and wants to protect the forest, protect the land, a demon who is trying to take her soul would be able to rot that land to convince her to give up her soul to save it. So that's how the demon magic works. Mariel instantly believes that Oz is at fault for the rot in the forest. This is the third act conflict of their relationship, considering that I want to say like a page before this, Mariel was declaring her eternal love for him, and she doesn't allow him 2 seconds to explain himself and instantly accuses him, along with her family, that he must be the one rotting the forest. The explanation that is given is that, well, he's the only demon in town, so it must be him. My question is, how do you know that? How do you know he's the only demon in town? You don't know that. You know that he is here and he is a demon. That's it. To have these characters simply assume that there are no other demons walking around, that no other demons got summoned to the mortal realm and another demon could be doing this, is a little crazy. To me, these characters are smart, or at least smart enough where this shouldn't be their instant knee-jerk reaction to this. I get it. Mariel is very connected to nature. She's very connected to the forest. So I guess this would be her knee-jerk reaction. Oh my God, someone's destroying my forest, and all signs point to him. So of course I'm going to blame him, even though he is the love of my life. It did give me a bit of whiplash, and I wouldn't be surprised if other readers felt the same. When Oz does go to her to try and explain himself, he gets overly emotional, and then lightning strikes her greenhouse and catches it on fire. These plants are like her pets, and they are killed in this fire. The lightning that strikes her greenhouse is white, and that is important. Mariel, now witnessing this lightning bolt destroy her greenhouse and Oz being right there, she of course blames him. Her bestie, I cannot say this girl's name, Caladia, the other witch. She is a badass. Magic throws Oz not only away, but clear across into the next town. This third act conflict is extremely weak in comparison to the rest of the book. Mariel is not an idiot. Oz is not an idiot. Yet, neither of them considered the color of the lightning that destroys her greenhouse. When I talked about Oz getting his warlock powers, specifically every time he loses control, the magic that comes out of him is blue. The text reiterates this every time it happens. His magic is blue, and the lightning that hit the greenhouse was white. It just was flimsy that these characters wouldn't have noticed that. I guess you can make the argument that emotions were heightened. These plants were like Mariel's children. Oz was desperately trying to make Mariel understand that he, of course, would never hurt her forest. He is not the reason that the forest is getting rotted through and through. There was a lot going on, and you can make the argument that with the emotions flying, that they wouldn't have noticed that the lightning was white. I just feel, even if they may not have noticed it right off the bat, take a moment, take a pause, take a breath, and then just think about what just happened. You'd be like, oh, wait, the lightning was white. I know Oz's lightning is blue. So clearly it wasn't him. It was just the weakest part of the story. Now we've come to the climax. Everything's coming to a head. This is when we find out that Astaroth, who was the only other demon that had something to lose with this soul bargain, is in fact in Glimmer Falls. There is a scene earlier on with Mariel in a library trying to do research on the demon deals, and she runs into a man. And I remember when that happened, I made a note saying, this man is a demon. And sure enough, that was Astaroth. He has been in town since essentially Oz has been there to protect his investment of this bet and make sure that Oz takes Mariel's soul. Astaroth is in Glimmer Falls and he has chosen chaos.
You're all going to hell. Goodbye.
He is the one that has been rotting the forest. Astaroth is determined to get Mariel's soul. He puts her in a no-win situation. Essentially, she has no choice but to trade her soul. And that effectively completes her deal with Oz. Oz does try to stop this, but he ultimately fails. And so now we have Mariel, who is soulless. Up until this point, Oz has talked about the fact that when this would happen, Mariel would not be herself. It would be essentially taking all the color out of someone. Drain all the color out and you are now in black and white. That is the best way I could describe what happened to Mariel when her soul was removed.
Sensible shoes are important. I think I'll buy some more.
What Astaroth was not prepared for was that Mariel uses the same trick that the warlock did. Oz had told Mariel what had happened with the warlock. So instead of her soul going to the demon plane, it transfers to Oz. So now Oz has both the warlock soul and Mariel's soul within him. Now with Mariel's soul, Oz feels like he could make a bargain with Astaroth, and if he does it correctly, can fix everything. He tricks Astaroth with an added caveat to his bargain. He is able to transfer Mariel's soul back to her and retain that warlock soul within him. He basically just plays a reverse Uno card on Astaroth and wins.
Yellow card.
The unit reverse.
He's Uno reversed it.
Checking everything off, Mariel has her soul back, Oz still has the warlock soul, and they've managed to finagle their way out of their demon deal. Nothing is hanging over their heads. The forest is saved, and Oz learns that because he took in that warlock soul, he is now immortal, and he and Mariel can grow old together. Adorable. Adorable. Perfect ending. Mariel, she is our nature witch, accident prone, stronger than she looks queen. I think this character is very well written. I think she has an amazing character arc. I think her character arc would be especially meaningful to those who have to deal with narcissistic mothers and family expectations of not being the perfect child. I related to her in a lot of ways, not just with the nature magic, definitely with the familial issues that she dealt with, even though this is a magical world. Then we have Oz, who was once the most feared demon bargainer and now is just this romantic goober for Mariel, and I absolutely adore him for it. I loved his growth in how he dealt with his new situation. He went through the stages of grief, his acceptance of the soul early on, and then eventually being happy about it because it gives him the ability to be mortal and grow old with Mariel was just perfect. It's especially nice when he realizes that the life he was living as a soul bargainer was never truly what he wanted. Even though he was praised and had this reputation prior to getting the warlock's soul, he wasn't happy. He finds his happiness being in the mortal realm, living as a mortal with Mariel. Caladia is the truest BFF. She is a badass who stands by Mariel like a protective older sister. She is strong, takes no shit, but she also has a heart of gold and is willing to see the good in someone even if she used to only see the bad. Thimi is the pixie friend and she's a little scatterbrained. Her character just kind of pops in here and there. She doesn't really play a big significant role, although I will say she is involved in probably one of the funniest scenes in the book that made me actually laugh out loud, which she has to carry Oz in a potato sack because he needs to get to the forest quickly, and it would just be quicker to have her fly him there than to hike through the woods. I laughed hysterically just imagining this like hulking demon man being carried by this cute little pixie. Stimmy is still a loyal friend through and through. Diantha is Mariel's mother. She is the absolute worst. I didn't mention her a lot because quite honestly, I wasn't a fan of the scenes that she was in. I didn't like how she treated Mariel. She is the absolute worst kind of mother. Was definitely one of the big reasons I related to Mariel so hard. I know what it's like to have expectations put on you because your family expects so much from you, and when you can't deliver, it is mentally and emotionally crushing. You want to please these people who you think love you unconditionally, and when you accept the fact that no, there is a condition to their love, and this is the condition. What the pressures they are putting on you, those are the conditions of their love. And because you are not fulfilling them, you will not get their love. And as soon as you accept that, you kind of free yourself. That's what happens to Mariel, and it was nice to see. I have no sympathies for her mother. She can rot in hell. I knew Astaroth was ultimately going to be the baddie when they introduced this random man character early on when Mariel was doing research in the library. I was like, oh, I spot you. You are a demon. I wasn't sure it was Astaroth, but I'm not surprised that he ultimately was the big bad. We didn't get much from him except him being kind of this mustache twirling villain. He fit that role pretty well. In looking at Sarah Hawley's next book, I believe it focuses on Astaroth and Calladia a little bit more. I believe they are the next couple. I am interested in reading that next book, although it may be a while before I pick it up. All in all, this was a cute romantic comedy with magical shenanigans, and I thoroughly enjoyed reading the book and following these characters. I thought the romance was super adorable. I loved the dynamic between the characters. I feel like they were very much on a level playing field, which I appreciated. I like romance when it's a romance of equals. I think all the characters are well written. I think that Mariel is definitely relatable. I just think all of them were just super fun to read. The love story does happen fairly quickly. This was not a problem for me. It did not bother me, though I prefer slow burn romance. If the story is well written, a quick love doesn't really bother me and doesn't really hinder or affect how I feel, how the story goes. I really didn't expect it to be a slow burn. I anticipated that it was going to be a rather quick romance, a tumble in the sheets after just meeting the guy kind of book. So if that's not your kind of romance story, that's fine, but you've been warned. Speaking of tumbling in the sheets, were you getting progressively annoyed with how many times I said demon dick? Welcome to how I felt reading this book. This was the only other flaw for me, the amount of times that Mariel thinks about and talks about Oz's demon. It happens so much. I would say first 2 times it's referenced, I was okay. By the 3rd, 4th, 5th time, I was like, oh my gosh, I get it. You are really fascinated by that appendage. It's fine, girl. I'm sure he's anatomically correct for you to get your groove on, okay? The other thing that I felt was very weak for the book was the 3rd act romantic conflict. I feel like that could have been written a lot stronger in terms of how the characters were set up, how this world was set up. It is definitely, for me, the weakest point. It did affect my rating for this book. I did enjoy the climactic ending of the soul swapping scene between Oz, Mariel, and Astaroth. It was very clever how Astaroth and Mariel managed to swap souls where they ended up with the correct soul and simultaneously got out of their demon bargain. I thought it was very cleverly written, and I like that it was a callback to what happened to Oz. Despite my few minor issues with the book, I would say this was a very nice book to end the autumn season with. A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon is definitely a solid 4 out of 5 for me. It is a cute love story that inexplicably has a bajillion references to demon deck. I would love to hear from you if you have read this book. Did you enjoy this book? Do you think there was excessive references to Oz's demon deck? Do you think summoning a demon boyfriend would be easier than trying to navigate the dating world right now? Let me know in the comments below, or you can reach out to me on Twitter or Instagram. I have both. Until our next chapter together, merry part and blessed be.